Tonight, the world marks the first International Day to combat Islamophobia, to eradicate discrimination and hate against Muslims. A report issued by the UN shows hatred towards Muslims is at epidemic levels. And as we acknowledge Islamophobia globally, we also remember the countless Muslim victims who face persecution and even death because of their faith. Among those are the victims of the Christchurch mosque shooting that took place 4 years ago today in New Zealand. From the vaults, Maimona Hussein explains how to solve the problem of Islamophobia in the schools.
Presenting the holistic, comprehensive understanding of Islam, giving people an understanding that we're just also relatable in terms of, our core principles and values in so many ways, helps kind of normalize.
Assalamu alaikum and good evening. This is Muslim News Canada on Muslim Network TV. I am Catherine Bullock. Today marks the first International Day to combat Islamophobia observed by the United Nations. Ahmed Hussein, Minister for Housing and Diversity, tweeted a video message alongside Amira El-Gabawi, Canada's first representative to fight Islamophobia. Hussein says no one should have to live in fear for their religion. El-Gabawi says Islamophobia is a harsh reality for Muslim communities across Canada. A recent UN Special Rapporteur report on freedom of religion or belief shows discrimination and hatred towards Muslims is at epidemic levels. Last year, Pakistan, on behalf of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, submitted the proposed day to the UN General Assembly, which was later adopted after a unanimous resolution. An independent body of experts that reviews Canada's national security and intelligence activities is launching an investigation into potential Islamophobia at the Canadian Revenue Agency. While the National Revenue Minister, Diane Leboutillier, welcomed the decision, Muslim civil society groups have not. The National Council of Canadian Muslims, or NCCM, has issued a statement criticising the new review, saying there have been enough reviews and the time for action is now. In particular, the NCCM and other groups are calling for the suspension of a unit in the CRA called the Review and Analysis Division that they allege is biased. 75% of charities whose status is revoked are Muslim. A 22-member delegation from Myanmar has arrived in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh to discuss a project to repatriate Rohingya Muslims. Cox's Bazar is a border district that provides shelter to more than 1.2 million Rohingya Muslim refugees who fled military crackdown in Myanmar 2017. Last year, Bangladesh handed a list of potential returnees to Myanmar to start the repatriation scheme. Bangladesh's Refugee Relief and Repatriation Commissioner said the Myanmar delegation wanted to confirm the identities of the returnees in the list. Rohingya refugees have refused to go back on safety grounds before they are guaranteed their citizenship rights and are returned to their original homes. New Zealand today marks the 4th anniversary of the deadly terrorist attack on a mosque and an Islamic centre in 2019. Minister Andrew Little said victims of the deadly terror attack are always in their thoughts. He said that New Zealand's government is committed to reducing the threat of terrorism. On March 15, 2019, an Australian white supremacist killed 51 people and injured 40 more at the Al Noor Mosque and Linwood Islamic Centre in Christchurch, Sydney, New Zealand. He is currently sentenced to life in prison, for which he has filed an appeal with the court. In June 2021, the Ontario Ministry of Education gave the Muslim Association of Canada a $225,000 grant to develop an online resource tool for countering Islamophobia in the classroom. Today we have with us one of the developers, Maimona Hussein. Welcome to the show and Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam. Jazakallah khair. Thank you for having me here.
It's our pleasure. I know that you recently released the online tool, and I guess that means you've been very busy since June. Tell us what you've been up to.
Yes. Once we received this grant, there was a lot of work in terms of quickly putting things together. So bringing together a digital team, bringing together content development, and then doing a lot of good research on the ground. So it was putting all those things together, creating bite-sized kind of resources that could be practical and informative for educators. So we have a pretty diverse team, and that's something that we're really proud of.
So tell us about the tool. Tell us about the final product. What's in it?
Yeah, for sure. So you have about 6 hours of content into 50 bite-sized videos, clips. And so you have 3 different courses that are outlined. One that's around, the Islamic framework and worldview. The other is dismantling Islamophobia. And then the other piece is around, how do we do this in the classroom, and some practical workshops that are really easy for educators to pick up and deliver. And the idea is recognizing that educators have, the willingness to do these things within their classroom, but may not have the time and energy. And so it really is meant to be something that's quick and easy to take in, so you can spend time.
You mentioned that they're bite-sized pieces, and I noticed, I just was browsing through one of them, the video classes are like 8 minutes, 7 minutes, 6 minutes. Yes. Was that done on purpose to make them that short?
Absolutely. It's really meant for people to be able to spend maybe, 10 minutes or a few hours, because we also have supplementary resources. We have annotated bibliography. So it's meant for people recognizing how busy they are to be able to engage at whatever level they're able to right now. And so you get a little bit of information, a little bit of practical resources. And then you also have a piece that engages people to do a little bit introspection and thinking about, implicit biases, and how sometimes people, unknowingly, unconsciously, subconsciously might be a part of, this whole issue of Islamophobia, and how we can address those personally as well as systemically.
So you mentioned that that part about self-reflections. Are they resources then for personal learning, or are they meant to be actually used in the classroom?
Yeah, so they're definitely meant for use in the classroom. But if an educator wants to do that, it does require a little bit of self-reflection as well. And we ask that educators really think about why they're even addressing this, what they might be coming across in the classroom. And so it requires self-reflection from that perspective. But it's meant for the educators or whoever is using it to then be able to then take that and deliver that into the classroom once they've done some of that introspective work. But again, that engagement, all of that is flexible. This is meant for people to use at whatever level they're comfortable with.
And you mentioned, on the website, it says that you're put this project together using a anti-racism and diversity lens. What does that mean? What other lens could there have been?
Yeah, so that's a good question, actually. Right now, what we're seeing is that the anti-racism and diversity, these are the lenses that we really need to start looking at Islamophobia from, understanding that it's part of a larger system of systemic issues that we're facing, and placing it within that, so that it's something that educators and people in the classrooms recognize that it fits into all the other social justice issues that we're dealing with, but that Islamophobia also has a very unique history to it, and we need to also address it from an Islamic framework. So those are some of the pieces that we look at when we're presenting this.
So why did you decide to start out with the what is Islam? Because that's not necessarily an anti-racism lens.
Yes, that's an excellent question. And so this is something that we've actually gotten good feedback on, and it is because you can present stats, you can present the research, which we're doing in terms of what has even caused the development of Islamophobia over the last couple of decades. But then you also want people to have a good understanding of what Islam is. And so, presenting the holistic, comprehensive understanding of Islam, giving people an understanding that we're just also relatable in terms of, our core principles and values in so many ways, helps kind of normalize and helps people. And the idea is really to bring the human parts of this issue to people. When you're dealing with children in the classroom, when you're dealing with people, we have the educators speaking about why they're even doing this, what brought them to participate in this project. And we have videos of that as well. So it's really bringing that human aspect and helping people understand the Islamic framework, helping people to understand and normalize and internalize some of these things, so that you're not just looking at Islamophobia as the issue but as a more comprehensive piece. And if you are going to address Islamophobia, then you also need to address what is Islam, so people actually have an understanding that you want them to understand, not the understanding perhaps that's proliferated, from that Islamophobia stance.
That must be a pretty hard line to walk, because in the secular classroom, there's a pushback on anything sort of religious related or faith related. Or have you had any pushback about it being preaching and bringing religion into the classroom and blurring that secular line?
Yeah, again, a really good question. And so as we were launching this and developing this resource, we've been engaging in a lot of feedback. So the idea is to make this practical in a way that's also using all of that feedback from people in the community. So those are educators, Muslim and non-Muslim, within public schools, within some of the major school boards right now. So Toronto School Board, Peel District School Board, Halton District School Board, people that are dealing, in classrooms and what that is. So what we've heard from people is that this really gives them a good grounding. And if they're going to be addressing Islamophobia in their classrooms, they also want to know what is Islam, because those questions will come up and children are curious. And so, so far, the feedback has been positive in the approach that we've taken in terms of providing these three pieces: the practical, the dismantling Islamophobia, understanding the context of Islamophobia, and then offering that Islamic narrative, which is what we want. We don't want the Islamophobia narrative. We want the narrative of Islam and that framework. And so we're getting good feedback from administrators and everybody that we've so far asked, community stakeholders. We've gone out to community stakeholders, perhaps in other sectors as well. We're seeing people see a need for this in other sectors as well. So it has been welcomed.
How far back do you take the concept or definition of it and of Islamophobia? I mean, some people can trace it right back to the Crusades and the early Christian-dominated anti-Muslim discourses that were coming out. Or do you place it solely as a modern phenomenon?
Yeah. Okay. So for the context of what we're doing right now, what we're talking about is kind of at least over the patterns that we're seeing over the last couple of decades. Again, it's a matter of also contextualizing in something tangible, in something that people can relate to as well. And so when you talk about the research that's happening now in terms of the industry that's propagating Islamophobia, that there are key stakeholders that are funding into resources around Islamophobia. When you know that just in July of this past year, CBC has been reporting on hate-related resources online, and the number of hits they're getting, it's immense. And so contextualizing Islamophobia and that within the media, what we're seeing, this seems to be the place that people are able to relate right now. And that's kind of how we're defining Islamophobia within at least the last couple of decades, the patterns, the numbers.
Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned the consulting different school boards in Ontario, and I know it was a grant from the Ontario Ministry of Education, but MAC is a national association. Is it Ontario context related, or do you hope that other provinces will also use it?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. And so definitely one of the things that kind of situated MAC in being able to do the work that we did with this is we saw the value in this resource, and we, along with the grant, have invested more in terms of being able to really develop something solid. And the idea is, yes, we do have that reach beyond Ontario. And so the resource is meant, and it's aligned with Ontario curriculum guidelines. However, we've been getting feedback out in Alberta as well. Some of the educators out there have given us feedback that it is usable. And the idea is to kind of continue this work as well beyond the grant, and looking at the research and the work that's gone into this and the way that this resource has been developed. There's nothing else in North America, at least, that exists in this way. So there's definitely an appetite, and we want to be able to replicate and grow this project beyond that at this point.
Well, unfortunately, it's a much needed tool, and we wish for the day when it becomes an obsolete tool. And thank you for your work on it and for joining us on the show.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much.
You've been watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Stay tuned for our next episode. Stay safe and God bless.